Okay, American history class, we're finally to the last chapter, 21st Century America. The last chapter, I forgot to put a video up, an introductory video. Too late for that now. I'll just say that the last chapter talked about the return of conservatism a lot with Reagan, and he changes directions. I mean, here you had the New Deal with Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. So you had a lot of liberal policies that saw government trying to help people through different government programs. Reagan, when he ran for president in 1980, he said government isn't the solution to our problems, government is the problem. And he tried to scale back government's role. And he did with regard to like welfare programs and things like that, cut programs like that. But he didn't touch Social Security or a lot of the other New Deal programs, Medicare, Medicaid, because those were wildly popular and still are today. He increased defense spending, and thus you actually had, you didn't have balanced budgets, but rather had a huge deficit. And then you had the emerging AIDS crisis, which a lot wasn't done to address that, and part of that was homophobia. But anyways, I didn't get to go over that chapter, but hopefully you learned a lot from that. So now we're into the 21st century. This begins in 1993, so we're talking about Bill Clinton's presidency. And we're going to go on to the time that most of you were born, which is sometime in the second Bush administration. Clinton was a moderate Democrat. He tried to fancy himself as a new Democrat because liberal had become this negative term, and so his policies were more moderate. He did try to enact healthcare reform, but failed at that, and that's why it was so significant when Obama was able to get it passed, because presidents going back to well before Truman had been trying to get some type of healthcare program passed, because the United States is the only developed country in the world that doesn't have that. You did see in the 1990s where politics becomes much more vicious. Newt Gingrich really began that, and that might be kind of the source of this polarization we see today. And then, of course, we can't talk about Clinton without talking about the Lewinsky scandal and the impeachment ensuing because of that. But that ended up, backfiring for the Republicans who had impeached Clinton. Because he survived the impeachment trial and was acquitted, and many Americans saw that as, while they did not agree with Clinton's behavior in having an affair with an intern, they felt that people were really hypocritical and judgmental in trying to remove him from office, and something that wasn't really an impeachable offense. And then you had the election of 2000, which was crazy because the Supreme Court ended up deciding that. So Bush ends up becoming the president after a contentious election in 2000. And right after he's elected, you get 9/11. I mean, he had only been in office 8-9 months, and the terrorist attacks come on 9/11. The terrorist attacks were launched by Al-Qaeda, which was based out of Afghanistan, which is governed by the Taliban. So we go to war in Afghanistan to remove the Taliban from power and try to create a democracy. We are there for our longest war, and we would be there until the last withdrawal, as you saw, which was 2021. Over 20 years that we're involved in Afghanistan, and ultimately, I would say we were successful in helping to eliminate the threat from Al-Qaeda and the war of terror, or at least suppress it so much that we aren't concerned about it like we were immediately after 9/11. So in that regard, you could say that was part of the war was successful. But this effort to try to create a democracy in Afghanistan after 20 years ultimately failed, as you saw the reemergence of the Taliban, which is different from Al-Qaeda, by the way. But nonetheless, that is detrimental and terrible for many people of Afghanistan, especially women, that it returns like that. But at the same time, America's resolve for trying to build a democracy in Afghanistan just falls. I think as important as this is Bush goes to war with Iraq. And Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, absolutely nothing to do with it. And that was a huge, colossal blunder. And so if Bush is going to be known for anything, it would be for that. I mean, it was terrible. It ends up in an insurgency where it cost thousands of American lives, and there was no reason to go to war for Iraq. The claim was weapons of mass destruction, or even that they had something to do with 9/11, which they did not. And they did not have weapons of mass destruction. And it was a preemptive war, which is against all international regulations. And we didn't have any support from the international community because it was a preemptive war. It's ironic. We said we had to attack Iraq or they might attack us. Dick Cheney said if we don't, there'll be a nuclear bomb, a mushroom cloud over New York City. And that's just not justification for war. And it's ironic because that's what Putin tried to say about Ukraine is, oh, we had to attack Ukraine or they would have attacked us, and everybody knows it was a bunch of baloney. And then you have the recession, the Great Recession of 08, 09, and on into the teens. It began with the housing market bubble and collapse, and then the banking crisis. And it leads to the election of Barack Obama. Because Republicans were so unpopular because they were blamed for that economic crash, and the recession was really, really devastating and really bad. Obama's presidency is marked in large part. First of all, the big thing is he got the Affordable Care Act passed, Obamacare, and that was big because presidents had been trying to get something like that passed. Republicans and Democrats going back for some time. But there was also this vitriol response to Obama's presidency, and some of it, quite frankly, is rooted in racism. How is this? I'm just not stating that. The best example of this is Donald Trump, who continued to assert the false claim that Obama was not born in this country. It's called the birther movement. And that has racist undertones because he's our first black president. Oh, he wasn't born in this country. His birth certificate isn't real. It was fake. And this went on, and they just would not have made such a claim about any other president to say that his birth certificate was fake, and especially because it wasn't true. A big part that's also big is of course the legalization of same-sex marriage is huge. So and then Trump's election in 2016, which was legitimate for sure. I mean he lost the popular vote, but he won the Electoral College. That's huge because it was one of the biggest upsets in American history. There's no doubt. It caught everyone by surprise. But Trump's style is one that is so vitriolic. It's just in the gutter, and unfortunately, it's taken us into especially because of the 2020 election, because somehow the 2020 election, he says, is not valid, and that's just not true. So this idea that the election was stolen is not true, and then he encourages an insurrection, and now he's going to be put on trial for that, for criminal charges, felony charges, which he should be because he had attempted to stop the peaceful transfer of power, which never had been done in our history. I cannot stress that enough. That has never been done in our history. So that is the subject of this week's assignment, because I want you to truly understand the potential crisis that this country is facing in the 2024 election. We're in uncharted waters. We've never had a president who refused to concede the election. So much in our democracy is based on trust and the peaceful transfer of power. And the fact that he's going to win the Republican nomination almost certainly, but then also there's a good chance he'll be a convicted felon. And then still running for president despite promoting the lie that the election was stolen, and despite the fact that he had encouraged an insurrection on January 6th. That creates great danger for our democracy, and I'm not overstating that. We've never been in a situation like this before. Okay, that's my time, 9:45. I try to limit this to 10 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed this class. I hope you enjoy the video. And one last thing, on your reflective paragraph, because I run into this when I teach American federal government, because we talk about this a lot more, because in that class we talk about more about current events and things. But on that reflective paragraph, if you put in there that the election was stolen, you're likely fail the assignment, because that's factually not true. That'd be like saying in a math class that 1 + 1 = 3. And I had another student earlier in the semester, and they said, in my opinion, the election is stolen. And I failed them for the assignment. I was like, no. And they said, but I said it was my opinion. And I said, if you said, in my opinion, 1 + 1 = 3 in a math class, you still get it wrong just because you qualify it as that. And that's because as your teacher, I must address things that just factually are not correct. And that's the source of a lot of our problems right now. Okay. Best of luck. Thank you, and great having you guys in class. I'll be back with one more message as I post your final in a few weeks.